whole team that's black that plays for you.
Do I know? I support them and give them food and clothes and cars and houses. Who gives it to them? Does someone else give it to them? Do I know that I have? Who makes the game? Do I make the game or do they make the game? And there's 30 owners that created the league?
I'm not going to bring any black people to the stadium.
Well, is it easy to say that?
It's very easy for you to say that.
For you to say that?
I won't say that to anyone. I would never ask anyone not to bring someone based on race or color.
Okay.
Accordingly, effective immediately, I am banning Mr. Sterling for life from any association with the Clippers organization or the NBA. Mr. Sterling may not attend any NBA games or practices. He may not be present at any Clippers facility, and he may not participate in any business or player personnel decisions involving the team. He will also be barred from attending NBA Board of Governors meetings or participating in any other league activity. I am also fining Mr. Sterling $2.5 million, the maximum amount allowed under the NBA Constitution. These funds will be donated to organizations dedicated to anti-discrimination and tolerance efforts that will be jointly selected by the NBA and its Players Association. As for Mr. Sterling's ownership interest in the Clippers, I will urge the Board of Governors to exercise its authority to force a sale of the team, and will do everything in my power to ensure that that happens.
All right, that, of course, the new commissioner of the NBA making his final comments, and I applaud Adam Silver for the way he's handled this. He's only 90 days into the job. Anyway, joining us to discuss and talk about it, Rick Barry is a former NBA Hall of Famer, Nets and Golden State Warriors player, and also with us is Brian Claypool, a civil rights attorney. He also is a Clippers season ticket holder who sits in the same row as Chris Paul's parents. Guys, welcome to the program. Glad you're with us.
Thank you, Sean. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Good to be here.
Hey, Brian, let me start with you. I assume you probably have spoken to some of the families and some of the people that are actually involved, the players' families. If you sit next to them, what do they say?
Well, I went to the game last night, and I will tell you, outside the sports arena, people looked forlorn. They were just wandering around. They didn't really know how to be. Everybody was quiet. Got into the stadium, and fans started hugging each other, and I ended up giving a hug to Mrs. Paul and shook Chris Paul's father's hand. I was struggling with words to say. So on the way out after the game, I went up to the parents, and I will tell you, I know they're a very spiritual family, and I quoted some scripture, and I said, the Bible says there's peace in every circumstance. In other words, something good is going to come out of this. And immediately, both of them responded. And I will tell you, Sean, Mr. Paul said to me in a very quiet voice, "This is when God shows up." So what an inspiration this family is during a very, very trying time. And that also reveals
that's very inspiring, by the way. And also, too, I was dead set against those that were calling for, and I made a mistake yesterday. I said Phil Jackson. It was Mark Jackson, who suggested that the most powerful statement the fans can make is to stay away. And I'm like, these players, you go to a sporting event to watch the players. You're not there to look at the owners. I didn't even know before this weekend who the owner of the Clippers was.
Right, but let me share one more story for you. Yeah. At the end of the game, Doc Rivers was looking into the stand, smiling, pumping his fist, just complete strangers in the stand. And after the game was over, or right near the end of the game, he high-fived every single Clipper player and personnel member. He never, ever does that. He left the court and almost went into the stands. You could tell that he needed an infusion of human beings who cared unconditionally about those players and the coach.
That's very inspiring. As a matter of fact, the people I felt most sorry for in this fiasco, and it was a fiasco, were the players and Doc Rivers, who I think is he's gonna go down as one of the great coaches ever. I mean, look, he took this team, and if you're a Clippers fan and you're a season ticket holder, you know more than anybody. You don't exactly have the best record in the NBA, and believe me, I'm a suffering Knickerbockers fan, so I know what it's like.
Yeah, no, I've been through the misery, and you're absolutely right. And even Mrs. Paul made a comment too, which was revealing. She said also pray for my son, which is Chris Paul, because he was carrying such a heavy weight as the president of the Players Union. So he had a lot on his shoulders too.
And the last thing any player needs is this type of distraction. Now, Rick Barry doesn't know this. I think I told him one time before, when you were with the Nets many, many years ago, before you ever went to the Golden State State Warriors. I used to go to the Long Island Arena. Remember those days?
Oh, I remember those days.
Okay, and Dr. J played there in the old ABA league. So that's how far back my love of basketball goes. And you and I have become friends over the years. What's your reaction to this? I thought I don't think the NBA could have handled it any better with this caveat. Now that I do know who the owner is, and now that I know this guy's history, and I know that he paid out all this money, millions of dollars, because of his rantings on Hispanics and black Americans, my question is, why didn't the NBA act sooner?
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot also, Sean, and I have a real problem with that. I mean, let's face it, this is a private club, basically, when it comes down to it. The owners have a private club. They have, 82 pages or something of bylaws and things that they have to adhere to. And all of the things, as reprehensible as they were, that Donald Sterling has done over the years, it had nothing to do with the NBA. And I think they would have opened themselves up, and you talk about all these lawsuits that might take place, I think they would have opened themselves up to some serious lawsuits if they were trying to delve into that and say that had something to do with a negative thing for the NBA. The moment he did something, and this came out, that was disparaging to the NBA, Adam Silver wasted no time at all to jump on it, and I agree with you. This is a defining moment for him in his commissionership.
Hey, 90 days in, who wants to be handed this mess?
But he's done a great job. The way he handled questions, I think it was superb the way he did it. He gave the maximum penalty that could be given as far as the fine. He's going to try to make sure that they do everything they can to get him out of the game and not have him be an owner, which I think is absolutely fabulous, because there is no place for someone like this in the game of basketball.
And by the way, three-quarters of owners need to agree with that, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing. Is that some people are saying, well, this is a slippery slope, and I keep hearing all of this stuff.
Well, the only one that I heard say that was Mark Cuban.
No, there's some other people who've been bringing it up, some other reporters. I've been listening to a lot of stuff about this, and they're all concerned about this. Trust me on this, and I think you would agree with me, and Brian would agree. Any owner, because it'll always get out, any owner, when they have a vote, would take the side of Donald Sterling of this, would be found just as guilty as Donald Sterling for backing him up on this. He's going to be out.
Oh, I agree. Look, he's digging in his heels. He's claiming that he's not going to leave. I just don't think that's going to happen, and I think there's going to be enough pressure brought to bear that he's not going to want anything to do with it. I was reading in one of the New York papers this morning that, well, there's two things that have come up. Number one, apparently other owners fear that there are incidents in their past that now may be scrutinized. And the second thing I read is that, owners are afraid of the slippery slope. But, I mean, if you're like him, then you don't belong in it either.
Exactly right. That's the point. I agree with you 100%. What they did in the past is over. It's in the past. They have to do something that has a negative impact on the NBA and the organization that they're a part of. And if they didn't do anything in the past that was causing that problem, then they have nothing to worry about. And if they do anything, hey, they should be gone just as well. And it takes 3/4 of their constituency to vote them out, and they should vote them out if they do something wrong. This sets a stake in the ground and saying, hey, this is never going to be tolerated here in this league, and every other league should take notice of this, every other sports association, that this is the way it should be.
Hey, Sean, can I respond to Rick's prior comment?
Ahead.
Yeah, I respectfully disagree. Rick, I admire you. You've been a great inspiration to me. But, I've been in the trenches the last decade of my life as a civil rights lawyer fighting. My clients are predominantly Hispanic, low-income Hispanic, and black families who have been subjected to either civil rights violations or sexual abuse. One of the lead lawyers on the Miramonte child abuse case. And the problem I have with how the NBA handled this is this, and I wish I could be popping balloons with everybody, but for 10 years now, the NBA has known categorically that Donald Sterling is a racist. And you mentioned the NBA private club. Well, your private club becomes public when you start publicizing nefarious behavior like Sterling did 10 years ago. When he's got public lawsuits filed by prior tenants, he's got public lawsuits filed by the federal government, he's got Baron Davis talking about being heckled, he's got female reporters in his locker room saying, hey, adore these beautiful black guys. Here's the problem I have. The reason why nothing was done over the last 10 years is because the Clippers were irrelevant. They were a low-income team, just like the low-income clients that I have been representing. Those people are preyed upon. The discrimination is exploited because there was nothing relevant. Now, when the Clippers became good and we finally got Blake Griffin, finally got Chris Paul, and finally got Doc Rivers, now all of a sudden the NBA is going to give this perception that, like, oh, we're going to take care of this, hardy har har.
Well, wait a minute. In fairness, though, we've got to put Adam Silver in his own category here. I mean, he's just been on the job a short period, and If you want to go back to the David Stern and be critical of him,
absolutely. No, Sean, I apologize. I'm not blaming Silver. It's the culture. I
agree with you. I was shocked. I was shocked that all this information was out there, and now because a tape made it public, and then everybody look. I didn't know who the owners of the Clippers was. I just didn't. I don't care about the owners. I care about the players. That's why I was glad the fans went last night, because you know what, the players deserve the support. You know, I felt sorry for Doc Rivers. He's got to coach a team in the midst of this chaos. I mean, that was a pretty tough thing to do last night. So,
yeah, well, let me just say one thing about, it was so foolish. I mean, the game and the fans should not pay a penalty for the idiocy of Donald Sterling. So they made the right decision in that regard. And I send my kudos off to the Clippers for what they did. They made their little statement before the game in Golden State. They let it be known that they had an issue with this. And then they got themselves back together when they went home and played a good basketball game and won the game. And I think that they acted appropriately for this. To do anything else outside of this, to talk about boycotts and things of that nature, would have been absurd.
Yeah, but Rick, here's another problem, though, that Adam Silver, it might have fallen short on. In California, it's a community property state, and Donald Sterling's still married to his wife. So when Adam Silver was asked yesterday by a reporter, hey, did you make any prohibition on the Clippers team being sold either to his wife or a family member, he categorically said no. And that was a big mistake, because the teachable lesson in all of this is there has to be some consequence for being an overt racist and bigot in our country. Now, if his wife somehow wrestles this team back, Donald Sterling is still in the same place he is, getting the same stream of revenue. He gets 50%
but they've got a problem, because, for example, there may be an issue in the state of California that this being a two-party consent state on the recording and where it took place, et cetera, and that's all going to be, I'm sure, vetted out in the future. But you do raise a good point here. You know, there are going to be conflicting laws in all of this, and I assume that a court is going to clean up the mess. Let me go to a bigger issue, though, if I can, for just a second, because the one thing, you're a civil rights attorney, Brian, and I'm glad to hear that's what you do. There are civil rights abuses. There are people that are racist. We all know this. But I think this incident makes a point that I have made very often, which I do not believe that the vast majority, overwhelming majority of Americans think this way. The overwhelming majority, the reaction of the country has been one of feeling, they were repulsed by what they heard. They're disgusted by what they heard. And most people reject racism in any shape, manner, or form. And I think you also see that. That's maybe what, you were talking to Chris Paul's dad. Maybe that's what he was referring to. That this is, in that sense, a moment where we know as a society that people that hold racist views are ostracized and should be.
Right. I think that's a great point, but I think the difference here, Sean, I think it's a great point. I've gotten a lot of tweets and a lot of emails confirming exactly what you're saying. They're like, what are you talking about? This guy's talking to a mistress, in their living room or over the phone, and, why is he losing his team over this? Yeah, so I've gotten a lot of those. I hear you, but here's the difference, though. When owning an NBA team is not you don't have a constitutional right to own an NBA team. There's no First Amendment issues here. There's no state involvement.
Totally agree with all that. No discussion.
Yeah, it's a privilege, a private privilege to own an NBA team. The difference here is it's almost tantamount to running a franchise like a McDonald's or a Burger King, and you're a franchise owner. There are rules that you have to live by, Sean. It's written into a franchise agreement. It's written into bylaws. It gets down to bare basics.
All right, I'm just running out of time, and I do apologize, Brian. And Rick, great to hear from you again. And one of these days we're going to have to go to a game together. All three of us. It would be a lot of fun. And Meadowlark Lemon was on TV last night, who I just grew up just idolizing. I went every single time there was the Harlem Globetrotters came to the Nassau Coliseum. I was there. Just one of the most amazing shows you'd ever see. A lot of fun.